That patch of grass behind your house. The one you mow, maybe barbecue on a few times a year, and otherwise mostly ignore. In 2026, in a growing number of states, that exact patch of land is legally allowed to become an entire second, fully permitted home, complete with its own kitchen, bathroom, and front door, without you needing a special exception, a variance, or a sympathetic city council vote. This isn't a loophole. It's not a gray area workaround like some of the tiny house stories we've covered on this channel before. It's an actual, deliberate, state-mandated shift in housing law that's happened over the past several years. And it's accelerating right now, in real time, in 2026. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what these backyard homes are called, what they actually cost, how fast they can legally get approved in the most ADU-friendly states, and the specific steps to find out if your own backyard qualifies. Before we get into the numbers, hit subscribe now, because I'm going to walk through the entire process step by step, from checking your eligibility to breaking ground. And the most recent law change covered in this video could genuinely save you months of waiting if you're in the right state. Subscribe now so you don't miss any of it. Let's start with what this backyard home is actually called. The formal term is an accessory dwelling unit, almost always shortened to ADU. Depending on where you live, you might also hear it called a granny flat, an in-law suite, a backyard cottage, or a casita. Whatever the name, the definition is consistent. A self-contained living space on the same lot as your main house, with its own kitchen, its own bathroom, and its own sleeping area. Legally and functionally a complete, separate home, just built on the same property instead of a different lot. ADUs come in a few distinct forms, and the type available to you often depends entirely on what's already sitting in your backyard. A detached ADU is a brand new, freestanding structure, built from the ground up, completely separate from your main house. The most flexible option, but also the most expensive, since you're constructing an entire building from scratch. An attached ADU shares at least one wall with your existing home, which typically costs less because you're extending existing structure rather than building an entirely independent one. In a garage conversion, sometimes the cheapest path of all, takes a structure that already has a foundation, walls, and a roof, and converts the interior into a livable unit, skipping a huge portion of the raw construction cost because so much of the building already exists. This matters immediately for your own planning, because the type of ADU that makes sense for your backyard specifically depends on what you're starting with, not just what looks nicest in photos. Let's talk real numbers, because this is where a lot of backyard home dreams either take off or stall out. According to current 2026 cost data, the average ADU costs around $180,000, though most homeowners end up spending somewhere between $40,000 and $360,000, depending on size, type, and finish level. Cost per square foot typically runs $150 to $300, with some high-end or complex builds going well beyond $600 per square foot. Most ADUs land somewhere between 600 and 1,200 square feet. Those smaller units are increasingly common as owners look to control costs. The type of ADU you choose swings that number dramatically. A garage conversion can come in as low as $80,000 total because the foundation, framing, and roof already exist and don't need to be rebuilt. A fully detached, ground-up unit, on the other hand, can run $400,000 or more once you're building everything. Foundation, framing, roofing, utilities from nothing. On top of construction costs, you'll need to budget separately for permits, which according to current data, typically run somewhere between $1,300 and $9,000 depending on your city, plus professional fees. Architects and engineers typically charge around 10% of total construction costs, and in some cities like San Francisco, municipal fees alone can add another 6 to 9% on top of that. In San Francisco specifically, total project costs, including all professional and city fees, frequently exceed $125,000, and the full process, from decision to finished construction, can take more than 18 months from start to finish in that particular city. The good news is that ADUs are also widely considered one of the better returns on investment in residential construction. Beyond the ability to generate rental income, a well-built ADU is broadly reported to increase overall property value by more than the cost of construction itself. And interest in ADUs has grown substantially over the past 2 decades, A recent nationwide analysis of hundreds of millions of real estate listings by Freddie Mac found 1.4 million properties already had one. It's also worth budgeting for the costs that show up after the walls go up, since these are the ones people most often forget to plan for. Site work, grading, excavation, and preparing the ground itself can add a meaningful amount depending on how level or accessible your specific backyard already is. Utility connections, extending water, sewer, and electrical service out to a detached structure, are frequently one of the largest hidden line items in a project budget, especially on larger lots where those connections have to travel a longer distance from the main house. And post-construction cleanup and waste disposal, while relatively small individually, are easy to under-budget if you're working from a rough estimate rather than a detailed contractor quote. None of these costs are unusual or a sign something's gone wrong. They're simply part of the real total that the headline per square foot number doesn't always make obvious up front. For years, the single biggest obstacle to building an ADU wasn't cost. It was time, specifically unpredictable, drawn-out permitting timelines that could stretch a straightforward backyard project out for the better part of a year or more, with no guaranteed endpoint. California, which has consistently led the country on ADU legislation, passed a wave of new laws effective January 1st, 2026, specifically targeting that problem. Under the newest rules, local agencies now have exactly 15 business days from the moment an application is submitted to determine whether it's complete. Miss that deadline, and the application is automatically deemed complete by default, starting the clock on the broader 60-day mandatory approval window that California law already required for standard ADU applications. If an agency does find the application incomplete, they're now required to provide a specific, itemized list of exactly what's missing. And once you resubmit with those fixes, the agency legally cannot introduce new objections that weren't on the original list. That single change closes off what have been one of the most common sources of delay nationally. Cities restarting the clock over and over with new requests each time a homeowner resubmitted. California also now requires every jurisdiction in the state to maintain pre-approved ADU building plans, publicly available online, starting this year. Using one of these pre-approved plans specifically can cut the approval timeline down to as little as 30 days, half the standard window, because the design itself has already cleared review before you even submit. And for homeowners in coastal zones, where ADU permits used to require a separate coastal development permit process that could drag on for 6 to 18 months and cost $5,000 to $15,000 in fees on its own, a new law effective this year created a firm 60-day approval window for that process specifically, opening up hundreds of thousands of coastal properties that were functionally blocked from ADU construction before. California's 2026 package also included a provision specifically for disaster recovery, allowing local agencies to issue a certificate of occupancy for a detached ADU before one is issued for the main house. In cases where the primary dwelling was damaged or destroyed by an emergency and the ADU itself has already passed all required inspections. In practical terms, that means a homeowner rebuilding after something like a wildfire can move into a completed, code-compliant ADU on their own property while the main house is still being rebuilt, rather than being barred from occupying anything on the lot until the entire property is finished. A genuinely significant change for families navigating disaster recovery timelines that can otherwise stretch on for years. This isn't unique to California, either, even though California remains the most aggressive example. Utah passed its own legislation this year requiring most cities to allow ADUs by right on single-family lots, meaning homeowners in Utah no longer need to seek discretionary approval or convince a planning board case by case. If the lot qualifies, the ADU is allowed, full stop. That phrase, by right, is worth pausing on because it's the single most important legal concept in this entire topic. A by right approval means the city cannot deny your compliant application through discretionary review, design review boards, or public hearings. If your plans meet the objective standards laid out in the code, size limits, setbacks, height restrictions, the city is legally required to approve it. No neighbor can show up at a hearing and block it. No planning commission can simply decide they don't like the design. That's a fundamentally different process from the old model, where ADU approval in many places functioned more like a discretionary favor than a guaranteed right. In states with strong by-right ADU laws, like California and increasingly Utah, this shifts the entire homeowner's job from convince the city to let me build this to make sure my plans objectively meet the published standards. A much more predictable, much less stressful process, because the outcome depends on compliance, not persuasion. That said, it's genuinely important to know your specific state and city rules before assuming any of this applies to you. Not every state has adopted by-right ADU laws, and even within ADU-friendly states, individual cities can still add their own layers of requirements around setbacks, parking, and design standards on top of the state minimum. Though under current California law specifically, if a city's rule is more restrictive than what the state allows, the state law wins. Here's the actual, practical process for finding out whether your own backyard can legally become a second home. Start by checking your state's ADU law directly. Since this is the foundation, everything else builds on. A growing number of states have passed dedicated ADU legislation in the past 2 years specifically, so even information that was accurate 18 months ago may already be outdated. Next, check your specific city or county's local ADU ordinance. Since local rules on setbacks, maximum size, height limits, and parking requirements still vary significantly even within states that have strong baseline protections. Many cities now publish this information directly online, and a growing number are required to post pre-approved plans as part of the newest 2026 legislation. Then, get a realistic read on your lot itself. Detached ADUs typically need adequate side and rear setback distances from your property line, and utility access, water, sewer, and electrical capacity matters enormously for cost, since running new utility lines a long distance across a large lot adds real expense that a lot with utilities already nearby wouldn't face. Finally, decide which ADU type actually fits your situation. If you already have a garage, a conversion is very often the fastest and cheapest path to a finished unit. If you don't, or if you want something fully separate from the main house, a detached unit gives you the most flexibility at the highest cost. And if maximizing budget efficiency matters most, an attached addition sharing a wall with your existing home often lands in the middle on both cost and complexity. So let's bring this back to where we started. That backyard isn't just outdoor space anymore in a growing number of states. It's a legally protected, increasingly fast-tracked opportunity to build an entire second home, with real cost ranges you can actually plan around. And in the most ADU-friendly states, approval timelines that have gone from open-ended uncertainty to firm, enforceable deadlines the city is legally required to meet. The rules genuinely vary by state and city, and it's worth doing the specific homework for your own address before you get too far into planning. But the broader trend, especially heading through 2026, is unmistakable. What used to be a drawn-out discretionary favor is increasingly becoming a straightforward, by-right process, as long as your plans meet the published standards. If you want more of these, real housing law breakdowns, real costs, no exaggeration, subscribe, because the next video takes this same approach into something we've actually covered before on this channel. What happens legally when a backyard ADU gets built with a second kitchen that was never part of the original permit? Thanks for watching all the way through. I'll see you in the next one.